To add a little bit to who I am, I have an LIS degree from UCLA, that's University of California in Los Angeles. And I also hold 2 additional disciplinary graduate degrees from USC. One in Master of Public Art Studies and a Master in Heritage Conservation. I have spent my entire professional career in a R1 academic institution and a larger research library, so my perspective on the profession is heavily informed by these experiences. But the premise of my talk, the pedagogical future of libraries, will also apply to other kinds of libraries, public libraries, school libraries, that is K through 12 school libraries, specialized libraries such as law, health, museum, etc. I am using the term pedagogical as a catch-all to indicate the complex educational nature of libraries and their information literacy functions. I plan to talk for about 30 minutes, 25 to 30 minutes, and open up for questions. We'll see if it will work, and no plan survives contact with reality, but that's the intention. Okay. I will start a little bit with a general background. The foundational democratic principles for library science are relatively recent. Most of us would not have been allowed to enter the Library of Alexandria or most libraries throughout history, even if we had the wherewithal to try it. Or even if, and it's very likely we probably wouldn't have been literate enough to try. So the library as a civic and cultural institution, the way we're familiar with it today, that's dedicated to specific purposes and open to all or to many, is a relatively recent concept, and not without growing pains. Now, what does the word libraries conjure immediately? I would argue that libraries primarily are organizational structures. They have practices. Librarianship is a management profession and is a discipline that has its own philosophical, theoretical, and methodological set of best practices. Libraries are for people, and that includes both users and employees. Their spaces, their budgets, they have to demonstrate their return on investment to the entities that fund them. So in the case of the USC libraries, it's the university. In the case of public libraries, it's usually city or county government, etc. Libraries are not neutral institutions. They provide certain types of access to certain kinds of information. And partly because of some of these attributes, libraries are also symbolic institutions. And I wanted to address that because I think it's an important concept, the symbolism of libraries. So architecture and space represent an important symbolic embodiment of libraries. What you see to the left of the screen is an example of library architecture, kind of traditional historic architecture. This is the Doheny Memorial Library, one of our 18 or so libraries at the University of Southern California. It's a big research library. It is a frontal building with well-defined decorative features to delineate a grand entry. Steps take you from the ordinary daily nature of the street into an institution, and that's institution with the capital I. As a colleague of mine used to say, libraries are temples of wisdom and truth, and this library is designed to kind of showcase that. And such design, the symbolism of a library as a temple, is very common in older institutions, but more contemporary libraries, such as what you see to the right, in the case of the Helsinki Public Library in Finland. This one is designed with a much more democratic symbolism in mind. So architecture as conducive to open access, being transparent, and open to all. So a very different architectural premise to delineate the changing, yes? To delineate the changing symbolism of libraries. Let's see, symbolic.
Oh,
all right.
Ruth,
I think I'm back.
Yes, you're back.
Yes. All right. So symbolically, libraries are about collections, particularly print, or at least we think about libraries as print. Fundamentally speaking, though, what is a book? Again, we associate libraries with books. We use standard book sizes these days, and we think about libraries as a kind of a standard means of representing knowledge. But books, the codex, are an object of material culture with a rich history. Books come with their own furniture. Books generally are conceived of as sequential narrative objects that is in sequence between covers with a beginning and an end, and a certain type of tertiary apparatus, such as a title page, a table of contents, and an index. But books don't have to be sequential. And in fact, there are types of books that are not sequential and are more of a three-dimensional object. So this kind of history and appreciation of books as examples of both knowledge and material culture is also feeds into the symbolic nature of libraries. And lastly, let me advance the slide. Symbolically, we perceive libraries as spaces for quiet study and contemplation, but also as places for curiosity, discovery, and opening doors. And these are very powerful archetypes that attract many of us to libraries. I'm going to switch gears here. Nancy Cranich, who was president of the American Library Association, or ALA, in the early 2000s, wrote in 2005, and I'll quote directly, quote, "Free and open access to information is essential to civic participation because it encourages the development of civil society. When people are better informed, they're more likely to participate in policy discussions where they can communicate their ideas and concerns freely," end quote. This is a political statement that contextualizes the ethos, the guiding principles of libraries within contemporary civil society. So libraries as living and changing, multimodal, and sites of expertise. In this respect, libraries are changing and growing organisms. They're not fixed in time and space. They play a variety of roles as civic and knowledge institutions and rely on educational and pedagogical approaches. And this is true for us as a workforce. Within the libraries, as employees, we train, we mentor, we educate, and we grow ourselves. Libraries are part of the political landscape. For example, many countries have national libraries. The history of national libraries is part of the formation of the nation state. It's mostly a 19th century concept, although not necessarily so, but the nation state, the idea of the nation state with geographic boundaries, sovereign governments, linguistic traditions, citizenship concepts, etc., and the national libraries playing the role of national repositories with the right to hold a copy of anything produced within the nation state. Now, the United States does not have a national library. The Library of Congress, though it functions like a national library, is technically the Library of Congress. And the librarian, currently Dr. Carla Hayden, reports to Congress, and their appointment is confirmed by the Senate, They have to regularly testify before a congressional committee as part of reporting on the annual activities and impact of the Library of Congress, and to get funding approved, etc. So very much part of the political infrastructure. Another example of libraries within politics is that they're examples of soft political power of empires. For example, American libraries were part of the cultural export around the world of the United States Information Agency, USIA, particularly during the Cold War. What's important, I think, to us today and moving forward is that libraries are very much programmatic institutions. Many library programs combine elements of education and literacy within specific social and political contexts. So, for example, libraries as self-improvement, or as providing programs for self-improvement, such as what you see on the screen from the Los Angeles Public Library, a program, an online program to help people finish their high school diplomas. This idea of self-improvement is a very much a political approach to literacy and to information. The democratic principles of library programs continue through our partnerships with other entities, such as, for example, again, from the Los Angeles Public Library, a legal clinic, so partnering with a civic organization to provide information and services and expertise that everybody should have or have access to. Other programmatic examples include, and I'm sure you're familiar with those, literary speakerships, wellness programs, working with students to curate library materials. This is very common in academic and research libraries, various types of information literacy programs, etc. Programmatically speaking, libraries are also data, and so having a level of data literacy is very important for our profession. That doesn't mean we're statisticians. Commonly speaking, we shelve books by size. So most print is, there's regular standard shelving, and then oversized materials are shelved separately. We collect data on shelving capacity. We use circulation statistics for adding, withdrawing, and discarding from collections. Libraries do not keep everything, and not forever. Our collections change with time and space and need. Libraries use quantitative and qualitative mechanisms to develop our collections, to build our programs and educational outreach, and to redefine what we do, what we offer, how we offer it, and for whom. So libraries are sites of expertise. All of us have expertise, and we develop expertise. And that expertise requires currency. The concept of expertise is relative. So expertise is relative. We're not heart surgeons. But if you think about it, Dr. Christian Barnard, though he was the first surgeon to perform a relatively successful heart transplant in 1967, he actually worked with about 30 surgeons, nursing, and other staff who all had different expertise to really enable this seminal moment in medical history. So our relative expertise lies elsewhere and at a different level. And we are heavily invested in education and information guidance as part of our relative expertise. So we bring relative expertise to build partnerships with other entities because libraries are civic institutions, and those partnerships really depend on the type of a library. And what I have as an example is from the American Library Association perspective. It's a 15-page document, fairly recent, detailing the impact on libraries towards healthy outcomes. So the document, the perspective, lays out both current practices, examples of successful partnerships, areas where library expertise furthers broad access to health information and to health literacy. So again, a type of an example where we insert our expertise. Another best expertise practice is leveraging our knowledge in curation of materials. An example I have is from the USC libraries about open educational resources. This library guide, and libraries commonly now create guides, is both a curatorial tool, but it is also a teaching tool with information for us to use as we do our best to move the needle, so to speak, towards reducing the cost of education. Now, this idea is relative. Again, education is expensive. Expertise is expensive. In the case of the University of Southern California, as a private institution, a yearly education is probably on the order of $46,000 to $50,000, i.e. someone's annual income or above someone's annual income. So this is an expensive institution. It is not as if in the libraries we will eliminate the cost of education for students, but what we can do and what we do is in a surgical way work towards reducing costs where we can, particularly where it comes to textbooks. So in this example, let me see if I can actually bring it up. I can bring it up. What we have done, and again, we're using this as a tool, is to describe what an open educational resource is, as opposed to other free information out floating around on the internet. Information about creating open educational resources, case studies. So this is the curatorial practice of libraries, a careful selection in certain areas, including examples from libraries. And on the bottom, as you can see, examples that are subject specific. We're talking about a university here, so not necessarily appropriate to every environment, but also placing this as a mandate, again, in trying to move the needle within both the university's initiative, but also in a public policy initiative of our state of California. And so public and private institutions are really working to meet the in this case, California Textbook Affordability Act in their own way. See, so speaking of policy, federal policy is also an important way for us to examine and leverage our expertise. Over the last decade or so, the federal government, the Office of the President, has really pushed and mandated to ensure that federally funded research is available for free, immediately, and in an equitable way to all of us, the taxpayers. And this might sound nebulous, but many research institutions receive grants, and that includes private institutions such as USC, receive federal grants for research. So the National Institutes of Health, National Science Foundation, National Endowment for the Arts, National Endowment for the Humanities, institutions successfully get grants towards research. And because this is federal grants, that are funded by the taxpayer, the idea is that the taxpayer should then have access to research, and this includes data. Social sciences and medicine and sciences rely heavily on qualitative and quantitative data, or they generate their own data as part of the research. But to some extent, the humanities also generate qualitative data in a variety of ways. So the mandate is to ensure open access, including data. You can imagine that with our expertise in information literacy, this very much plays into the core of what libraries are today. So as federal agencies begin pushing institutions to ensure that this mandate is met and that research is preserved in an open access way, libraries have a role to play. It's true for academic libraries. It is true for other types of libraries, particularly public and special libraries. And we have a role in influencing information literacy and providing guidance towards dispelling as much as possible misinformation, because it is very easy to misinterpret research. Although I would argue that we probably shouldn't be spending our resources on trying to dispel disinformation. There's a difference between misinformation and misinterpretation and disinformation, and I see libraries as having a role in the former and less in the latter. Libraries do not shy away from technology. We have been early adopters of technology since certainly the post-World War II period and before, but really this has taken off in the period after World War II. It is okay to have reflexive reactions when a new wave of technology comes, such as, I don't know, artificial intelligence, we're all human beings, and we may sympathize with Emperor Wilhelm II, Kaiser of Germany, who is supposed to have said around 1903 that I do believe in the horse. The automobile is no more than a transitory phenomenon. And sometimes we feel this way about the onslaught of technology. Of course, the automobile went a long way from being a carriageless horse, a horseless carriage, as it was in the early part of the 20th century, to really harnessing a lot of technology and also changing our urban infrastructure and social relationships, so really having a tremendous impact on society. So as artificial intelligence becomes a mainstay of modern life, and we all use already artificial intelligence, even if we don't think about it. Every time I type something into my computer, it often suggests wording and phrases, not necessarily bad ones. I sometimes say yes and sometimes no. We're using artificial intelligence and large language models. Many libraries post frequently asked questions, FAQs, because many types of information needs can in fact be addressed, at least in a kind of a surface way, by FAQs. Well, chatbots use those FAQs to then provide nominal information to users. And of course, we are also seeing use both within the libraries and without of generative artificial intelligence, such as ChatGPT and others. To this extent, we continue curating information for educational purposes. So in the case of this guide, again, an example from the University of Southern California, this is a guide that's of its time, and it is something that will continue changing as we, within educational institutions and as a society, continue using generative AI. Our students, our faculty, we use generative AI to brainstorm ideas for essays and for research. And because it is such a powerful tool, we are also suggesting that citing generative AI is important, just as we would cite the help that we receive from research assistants and collaborators, and also current limitations and ethical considerations. All of this information will be updated as time moves on. We are not alone, and as institutions and organizations with expertise, we can also rely on other entities and resources to help us in our development. So the White House recently put out the blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights that's percolating its way into other areas of civil society, including libraries. This is a blueprint. It is a work in progress. It is a very useful work in progress. It doesn't cover everything, but it lays out, and I'm going to scroll down a little bit, it lays out 5 principles for this Bill of Rights. And as we look at it, we can also see its use in our work towards information literacy with our users, but also for us as an information literate workforce, so to improve our own work. And all these 5 principles come with their own, I'm sorry for jumping around, they also come with their own recommendations for practices as of current knowledge or application as of current knowledge. And so as organizations of knowledge and information, we are using this to buttress our own work and to move it forward. Libraries are becoming increasingly programmatic and engagement and engage the users in a very active way. So I hope, and I am almost at the 30-minute mark, I hope I gave you a perspective towards our colorful evolution and pedagogical growth. Let's see what the next slide is. I have consulted some sources. These are not ChatGPT generated sources, although at some point I'm going to play with ChatGPT about generating bibliographies, see where this gets us. I am going to stop sharing my slide. Here we are, and see if people have questions or thoughts about libraries and their own experiences using libraries.